And the question in Revelation 20 is, when will the earth finally get fixed? I don't know if you know anything about how the earth was originally, but I remember when I moved to Rhode Island talking to the old people that had lived there, and they were like in their 90s, and they told us what Rhode Island, the state, was like 90 years ago. You know what they said? They said when they and their parents were in Rhode Island, when they walked to the beach, the water looked black. I said, why? They said there were so many lobsters that they just were, if you looked, the black was moving. They said there were lobsters, giant. Nobody ate lobsters back then. They were considered unclean. They fed them to their pigs. They would bring wagons. There were so many lobsters you could just almost not get wet, and you could scoop them up into wagons and feed them to your pigs. When you know, people that I knew that lived in the Southwest, they said when we got to our farms, like the original people, the people in Oklahoma that were the Sooners, you know, they ran across and got their farm plot. They said you threw seed in the ground, it just grew because the soil was so fertile. I mean, the stories about America when, you know, the colonies were here back 200 some years ago. I mean, the old growth trees. Did you know there's actually a group of people that buy old growth, which means the original trees are like 200 years old, furniture made out of, because there's no wood like that, because it was so beautiful. It wasn't quickly grown like we grow nowadays in tree farms. The earth needs fixing. In fact, this is what I wrote down. Our world is dying. Have you noticed? Have you looked at the pollution of our world? Did you know that this week they announced that 10% or 866 species of the world's trees are going extinct in the next decade? 10% of all trees are going to die out. Wow. The oceans are depleted. I mean, they have to keep going further and further to harvest fish. They're starting to fight over it. When the birds of Mexico City fly across Mexico City, they die breathing that in, and they fall, and there's falling birds all over. Industrial wastes have cast such a blanket of death across farms and forests of Eastern Europe that, again, it's like the trees are turning gray and dying, and of course their lungs are too. Well, that brings us to this. We're now, last time we were in 3 chapters. Now we're in, 3 of the divisions of the clear events. Now we're in Christ's earthly millennial rule, the first 6 verses, and then the final rebellion and great white throne, the last 9 verses. And so what we see there is what I've shown you so many times. We've already gone through, we who are alive and remain are caught up together with the Lord to meet him in the air. Then our lives are going to go through the fire while the tribulation is going on, and there's going to be all of that judgment. Then the reward time is finished, and we get on our horse, wearing our white gowns and the righteousness of the saints that it talks about, returning with Christ. He ends all of earth's rebellion, incarcerates the devil. Satan is put in jail, we'll see in a minute. Starts ruling, Jesus himself, what we've thought about every Christmas, that the Son of David is coming to sit on the throne of his father David. He finally comes, he sits here for 1,000 years, but mankind doesn't cooperate. So the rebellion takes place, the great white throne, and then our last hour together, we're going to look at heaven. So what happens? Well, this is what we're looking at right now. Christ the King has returned. We ended there before break. He returns as judge, but what he does before the great white throne, he makes the earth brand new. Now think about this. One thing will probably unite the world faster than anything else: climate change. Have any of you heard of climate change? Yes or no? Isn't that all we hear about? Everything. The weather is the storms are getting stronger, the winters are getting harder. If you pay any attention, all that's true. We just had in Florida 2 days ago the largest rainfall in 1,000 years hit. They keep revising it up. How many inches fell? The pictures are unbelievable. Satan knows he can unite the world. He knows the end of days judgments of God are coming. He's positioning his false Christ to jump in when the whole world is hopeless with the answer. Have you ever thought about that? climate change is becoming an inexorable, globally felt collision coming. And we're just waiting, for someone to solve the problem. It's just everybody, on everybody's mind. And Satan, who has the real artificial intelligence, he has super knowledge. He knows all about everything since creation. And since demonic intelligence is far greater than in human intelligence, he knows Jesus is going to end climate change. He knows Earth is dying. He knows only God can fix it. But the Antichrist comes for the earth dwellers to save the earth. And that's how the whole tribulation unrolls. Well, how bad is it? Well, it's April. Wildfires are already starting. They've already had some, can you believe it, in Colorado, where Bonnie and I live for a few weeks every year. But look at last year. The deadly heat waves that blasted the U.S. and Europe are making everybody think about global temperatures, their risk of rising temperatures. Just 3 years ago, 3 billion animals died in the Black Summer of Australia. It was 3 years ago. That was last year's slide. 3 billion animals. I mean, you guys, did you see on the news those poor kangaroos trying to run from the fire, and they can't hop and run fast enough, and they were burnt? But the truth is, our rapidly warming planet also poses many other under the radar threats. They have dire implications on all life on Earth, including us. By the way, that's a news article from the Europa Press via the AP, the Associated Press. That isn't a Bible person writing that. That's a normal person. Okay, look at this. This is another headline. Everything, everywhere. Microplastics are everywhere. We know that now. After 50 years of making plastic, shed from items like clothing. Every time you wash your clothes, some of it gets out in the washing machine, goes in the water, goes into the rivers, goes wherever it goes. Broken down trash, produced in factories. Those tiny pieces of plastic debris are the subject of many grabby headlines of late. What they're telling us is they've infiltrated the furthest reaches of the ocean. There's plastic everywhere on Earth. I know there's the mat of it out somewhere in the Pacific that's bigger than the state of Texas. But I'm talking about micro pieces are everywhere. It's in the fish. It's in the fish that you catch. Fish just go through, filtering water, and they're just sucking in all that plastic. It's in the snows of Antarctica. I mean, there's no spot where the snow is pure white snow anymore, whether it's Antarctica or the top of Mount Everest. The air we breathe, when tires, when cars, everything, the tires are just stirring up whatever's on the ground, and there's all kinds of pieces of, plastic cups and straws and whatever, and it's all ground up, and the air has this. And when the wind blows, it takes it everywhere. And now, remember I told you last week that about 9 months ago, a doctor taking a blood draw, for the first time in one blood draw, found plastic under the microscope in the person's bloodstream. So, that's unhealthy. By the way, here's an encouraging note. This is from Belgium. PFOSs and PFOAs, those are the forever chemicals, found in soil samples, but they're not in our water or vegetables. This really encouraged me. 2 harmful compounds, PFOSs and PFOAs, have been found in almost all samples taken from chicken runs. This is the article I'm reading to you. And vegetable gardens in Belgium, the compost, the eggs, the dust, and the serum, but it's not in the water or vegetables yet. Isn't that interesting? These forever chemicals that are used everywhere, they're used to make your clothes be wrinkle resistant. They're used to make things waterproof. They're used to make pans non-stickable. They're used everywhere. They just use them all the time because they're just amazing chemicals. And they make the packaging glossy, and they make things waterproof, and they make our clothes, and they even put them in other things we use. And these things are Well, they're everywhere. Look at this. The Guardian paper, the UK Guardian, 2 years ago, came to the United States because the British are into this. I mean, they're very ecology, climate-minded. And this is their article. I gave you the graphic of this is the shape of the United States with water glasses. And this is what they say. America has a water crisis. The UK Guardian said, we sampled the tap water across the US. We found, so this is they flew over here in the airplane. They brought their laboratory with them. They loaded it into this bunch of campers, RVs, and they dispatched their group. They went to every state. They went and would stay and get water out of the tap of hotels, of restaurants, of campgrounds, everywhere they went. We sampled tap water across the US. In our lab, we found arsenic, lead. By the way, arsenic, just in itself, is a chemical used to poison people. I mean, there's a play called Arsenic and Old Lace, and it's about the insidious effects long-term of poisoning people with arsenic. Lead poisoning is horrible. That's what got the Romans. Lead was the pipes of the wealthy, and the Romans were getting all this lead, and it caused the aristocracy to decline. And then toxic chemicals like those PFOAs and PFOEs. In our 9-month motorhoming around the U.S. by the Guardian and Consumer Reports, so they were working with the American publication Consumer Reports, they found an alarming level of forever chemicals, arsenic and lead, in samples taken across the U.S. That's not positive. And look at this. 80% of Americans' urine. Did you know when you go to the hospital, when you have any kind of surgery, they're always doing urine samples. And when you have a physical, they do a urine sample. You have that little cup, and you have to take it and put it in the little place and, hope no one sees you and everything. They're analyzing. The weed killer chemical called glyphosate is found in 80% of all Americans' urine. What is it? Well, look at it. They're just blowing it out on all of our agricultural fields because we don't want any weeds, and we don't want any bugs, and we don't want any birds, and we don't want any butterflies. Oh, we do want the birds and butterflies, but we're just putting out Roundup everywhere we can because you want wheat and nothing but the wheat. And you'll spray the world. I mean, and you want your sidewalks to have your lawn, no dandelions. We just want our golf courses to be immaculate and manicured. So we're blowing all this stuff out, and it's being breathed in, and it's in the soil, and it's in the water, and now it's in people's bodies, and they're called forever chemicals because they never leave. You can't flush them out, but the presence, there's so many of them, they're coming out in 80% of all Americans' urine. That's not positive. Let's get a little closer to current events. Zaporizhzhia. There was an explosion there yesterday. This thing is so large, you can't believe it. It's the largest nuclear reactor in Europe. It was the old Soviet Unions where they made all those horrible bombs that they have, like our horrible bombs, only we make ours in Washington and in Tennessee. They make theirs, or they made theirs, in Zaporizhzhia. Huge atomic plant, contested between Russia and Ukraine right now. Yesterday, a mine went off that the Russians planted, and it blew up right next to one of the towers, and it interrupted, it blinked the power. And they said, what will happen if the electricity stops? There's going to be a nuclear meltdown. Do you remember Fukushima? Do you remember 3 Mile Island, whatever? You know what it is. It's that reactor will go into such high temperature, it just actually melts, and it's so hot, it goes down into the ground, melting it as it goes, and it keeps going down. And if it hits the groundwater of any amount, which there's groundwater everywhere if you know anything about Ukraine, it will issue forth into a geyser. And they said that the radius of radiation spread and toxicity of cesium and all the other stuff is just off the charts. And they said the prevailing winds, one day it would blow straight toward Russia, the other day it would go straight toward Western Europe.